All right, so buckle up, everybody, because today we're taking a deep dive into a concept that's probably already on your radar as a philosopher: personal autonomy.
Ooh, sounds intriguing.
We're going to be going deep into excerpts from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on the topic. And trust me, it's a real rabbit hole of fascinating philosophical debates.
I can imagine it's a concept with so many layers.
Exactly. And to help us navigate this complex terrain, I've got an expert on hand.
Happy to be here.
So let's just start with the fundamental question here. What does it really mean, to be self-governing?
Right.
Yeah. What are the essential ingredients for a person to be truly autonomous?
That is the core issue, isn't it? It all boils down to an individual's authority over themselves. The inherent right to self-governance, simply by being an agent who can initiate actions.
So it's more than just making choices.
Yeah.
It's about having the power to shape those choices in the first place.
Precisely. And it's interesting how this concept of individual autonomy kind of mirrors the idea of autonomy for groups, but with one crucial addition: agency.
Ooh, I like where this is going.
With individuals, we bring in this idea of acting independently and intentionally. Adds a whole other layer to the discussion.
It's like individual autonomy is the foundation for any other kind of autonomy.
Yes.
Like if you can't govern yourself, how can you participate in governing a group, right?
Absolutely.
But I think where things get really interesting is when we dive into the different philosophical accounts of personal autonomy.
You're right.
I hear there's a real philosophical battle royale over this.
There absolutely is. Philosophers have developed, several competing views, each with its own nuances and challenges.
Okay, so lay it on me. Hit me with the first contender. Which philosophical school of thought is stepping into the ring?
All right, let's start with the coherentist accounts.
Okay.
These focus on the alignment between your actions and, your inner world, your deep desires, your values, your judgments.
So for coherentists, true autonomy isn't about freedom from all desires,
Right.
but about aligning your actions with your deepest values,
Exactly.
even if those values are to indulge in certain desires.
Yeah, they're all about internal harmony. They argue that even powerful desires like an addiction could be considered autonomous if they genuinely fit into your overall viewpoint.
Isn't that a slippery slope, though?
It can be.
Couldn't someone justify any action, even a harmful one, by saying it aligns with their values?
Yeah.
Where's the line between genuine autonomy and just being really good at rationalizing your actions?
That's a crucial point and a key criticism of coherentist accounts. You could theoretically manipulate someone's desires and actions into coherence without them truly being self-governing.
Right.
Think about brainwashing, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So internal harmony might be necessary,
Yeah.
but not sufficient for real autonomy.
Yeah.
We need something more to weed out cases of manipulation or coercion. What's the next account that tries to address this?
Next up are the reasons-responsive accounts. These shift the focus to your ability to understand and respond to reasons, both for and against your actions.
So it's not just about what I want, but why I want it,
Exactly.
and being able to justify my desires and actions with solid reasoning.
Yeah. And unlike coherentist accounts, these bring in an external element. They acknowledge that factors outside your control, things that limit your access to relevant reasons, can impact your autonomy.
So my autonomy isn't just about my internal state. It's also about my access to information and my ability to process it rationally.
Precisely.
That's a fascinating distinction.
It is.
So if I'm being manipulated or kept in the dark about important information, that could undermine my autonomy.
Yes.
Even if my actions seem to align with my values.
Precisely. And that leads us to another closely related but distinct account, responsiveness to reasoning accounts.
Okay, so if coherentists are all about internal alignment and reasons-responsive accounts add the element of external reasons, what new wrinkle do responsiveness to reasoning accounts bring to the table?
These go beyond just recognizing reasons.
Okay.
They focus on your capacity to actually evaluate and change your motivations based on reasoning. It's about the ability to critically reflect and potentially transform your beliefs and desires.
So it's not just about being aware of reasons, but about actively engaging in critical thinking, weighing different perspectives, and being open to changing your mind.
You got it. Responsiveness to reasoning accounts really highlight the dynamic nature of autonomy. It's an ongoing process of reflection and potential transformation.
That makes a lot of sense. But it also makes me think about cases where someone's reasoning might seem sound, but it's actually the result of indoctrination or manipulation.
Right.
How do these accounts distinguish between, like, genuine critical thinking and just being very good at justifying beliefs that were instilled in you through, like, coercive means?
That is a crucial point, and it brings us to one of the biggest challenges in this whole discussion: defining the minimum requirements for autonomy. Where do we draw the line?
Ooh, that's a great segue to the next part of our deep dive, where we'll grapple with the obstacles to defining minimal autonomy. But before we move on, let's take a moment to untangle a particularly knotty issue: the challenge of differentiating autonomy-enhancing reasoning from reasoning that actually undermines autonomy.
Excellent point. Let's take a closer look at that. One of the trickiest things about defining minimal autonomy is that the same reasoning process can be used in both autonomy-enhancing and autonomy-undermining ways.
Okay, yeah.
Take indoctrination, for instance.
Okay, so let's imagine someone who was raised in a closed community, like with a very strict set of beliefs.
Right.
They might be really articulate,
Huh.
even seemingly rational in defending those beliefs.
Yeah.
But how can we tell if they arrived at those beliefs autonomously?
Right.
Or if they're just, like, echoing what they were taught?
Exactly. On the surface, their arguments might appear valid, even compelling.
Right.
But if we look deeper, we might find their capacity for critical thinking has been limited, you know?
Yeah.
Their ability to question those core beliefs has been carefully controlled.
So it's like their intellectual world has been curated so they never even encounter, like, alternative viewpoints.
Yeah, exactly.
They might be going through the motions of reasoning, but the deck is stacked from the start.
Right.
That seems to, like, really undermine genuine autonomy.
Precisely. And this problem isn't limited to, extreme situations like indoctrination. We see it in more everyday phenomena, too. Remember our earlier conversation about weakness of will?
Oh, absolutely. I'm the queen of procrastination. Like, I'll know that I should be working on an important project,
Right.
but then I end up scrolling through social media instead.
Yeah.
It's like my short-term desires, like, hijack my long-term goals.
That's a classic case. Weakness of will shows us this, complex interplay between self-reflection, motivation, and the potential for, self-sabotage.
Right.
Even though you choose to procrastinate, it doesn't feel like you're fully in control.
No, it really doesn't. It's like there's a disconnect between what I know I should do and what I actually end up doing.
Yeah.
Does that mean I'm not exercising genuine autonomy in those moments?
It raises questions about the degree of autonomy you have in those situations. The interesting thing is, even when we're acting against our better judgment, we're still the authors of our actions. We're making choices, even if they're choices we later regret.
So it's not about always making the right choices.
Yeah.
But about understanding what drives those choices.
Right.
And taking responsibility even when we mess up.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. Which brings us to another crucial question. Is there a core part of ourselves, an attitude or desire that we can never truly be alienated from?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Even when we're struggling with weakness of will or internal conflicts? Yeah.
Something that remains truly us.
That is a profound question. Is there, an unchangeable bedrock of selfhood that, external forces or even our own internal struggles can't touch? What do philosophers say about this?
Some suggest that the desire for self-governance itself might be that unalienable attitude. It's the longing to be in control of our own lives, even when we make choices that seem to contradict that desire.
So even when we're, wrestling with addiction or giving into procrastination, there's still a part of us that wants to be free.
Yeah.
To make our own choices. It sounds almost paradoxical. But I can see how that desire for autonomy could be a fundamental aspect of the human experience.
Precisely. But then the question becomes, if that desire for self-governance is always present, even in those who don't seem autonomous, how can it be what defines autonomy?
Right. We need something more to differentiate between simply wanting autonomy and actively exercising it. It seems like we need to grapple with the forces that shape our choices, the power dynamics at play when we talk about autonomy. Exactly. This is where the conversation gets really meta. We're not just talking about autonomy, we're talking about the power behind our choices, the forces that shape how we exercise or fail to exercise our autonomy.
So this brings us to, the age-old debate. Do we have free will? Are we really in control of our choices, or are they predetermined by factors outside our awareness?
Right.
If everything is predetermined, how can we even talk about autonomy at all?
The free will debate. And it's absolutely intertwined with the concept of autonomy. If our choices are ultimately predetermined, even those that feel autonomous might be illusions.
So are you saying if determinism is true, then genuine autonomy is impossible? Are we just like puppets on strings with no real control over our actions?
That's the incompatibilist perspective. They argue that true autonomy can't coexist with the idea that factors beyond our control determine our actions. They believe genuine autonomy requires radical freedom, freedom from the causal chains of the universe.
So for incompatibilists, true autonomy requires us to somehow break free from the cause and effect relationships that govern the universe. It's a mind-bending concept, to say the least.
It is, and as you might imagine, it raises more questions than it answers. For instance, if our choices aren't caused by anything, how do we explain why human behavior often seems so predictable?
That's a good point. And if our choices are truly random, how can we hold people responsible for their actions? How can we have a system of morality or justice if our actions are just the result of, like, cosmic dice rolls? It seems like the very concept of responsibility crumbles if our actions are ultimately arbitrary.
Excellent points. These questions have led some philosophers to propose alternative solutions, like the concept of agent causation.
Okay, tell me more about agent causation. How does it attempt to address these issues? So agent causation, what's the deal with that? How does it try to solve this whole free will dilemma?
Well, it gets pretty complex, but the basic idea is that agent causation tries to find a middle ground between determinism and pure randomness. It suggests that actions are caused by agents themselves.
Okay, so by agents you mean like people.
Exactly. People or any entity that can be considered an agent.
Got it.
So instead of our choices being determined by prior events or just popping up randomly, agent causation says we, as agents, have the power to initiate actions independently of any prior cause.
So we're like the ultimate originators of our own actions.
In a way, yes.
Hmm.
But it's still super controversial, and there's not a lot of agreement on exactly how agent causation works or even if it's really possible.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a tough nut to crack. So if agent causation is still like up for debate, are there any other ways to reconcile the idea of autonomy with the possibility of determinism?
There are, and one really interesting approach comes from a neo-Kantian perspective, which focuses on what's called the practical point of view.
The practical point of view. Okay, I'm listening.
So from this viewpoint, even if our decisions are ultimately causally determined, we still have this unique human capacity for self-reflection and rational thought. And this capacity allows us to determine the significance of facts, to weigh different reasons and values, and ultimately reach our own conclusions about what to do.
So it's like, even if we're part of this grand causal chain, we still have the power to interpret our situation, assign meaning to our experiences.
Exactly. It's like we can't choose the hand we're dealt, but we can choose how we play it.
Ooh, I like that. So even if determinism is true and our choices are predetermined, we still have this responsibility, this power to make sense of those choices and decide what they mean for us.
Precisely. And that, I think, is where the real essence of autonomy lies.
Wow, that's pretty profound. So we've gone from coherentist accounts to reasons-responsive accounts. We've tackled weakness of will and the challenge of minimal autonomy.
We've been through it all.
And we've even wrestled with the big, bad free will debate. It's been quite a journey. But as we wrap up our deep dive into personal autonomy, what's the key takeaway for our listeners, especially for you, philosopher friend?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that personal autonomy is complex. It's a concept with many different interpretations, and it's deeply intertwined with questions about free will, moral responsibility, and the nature of human agency. And it's not something with an easy answer.
It's a journey of exploration.
Yeah,
And it's one that we all have to undertake for ourselves.
exactly. As you continue to delve into these ideas, remember that what matters most is that you keep asking questions, keep challenging assumptions, and keep seeking a deeper understanding of what it means to be a self-governing individual in a complex and interconnected world.
So keep those philosophical gears turning. And until next time, happy philosophizing.